Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday, assuming you are watching this live. If not, happy whatever day it is. I'm trying to think. Do I have any programming notes? I do not believe so. This is my weekly foray into the OSR subreddit, I guess technically. I usually say Reddit group. I don't know. Subreddit, Reddit, whatever, the forum on Reddit for the OSR gaming. If you're new to this, I happen to like to go through once a week, see what's hot, what's happening, check out the questions being asked, the things being on offer, and talk about it. So that is what we're going to do today. That is this stream. I don't have anything else to note, so I guess I'll just flick things over and see what's what. Whee! All right, as usual, I have not pre-looked at these. I'll even give it a refresh. All about trying to find some interesting subjects. As usual, let me know if there's any oddities with the audios or the videos. My bandwidth took like a couple of quick bumps, but it looks like it's good, so hopefully it sounds good if you're in here. Let's see, where can we begin? Here's one. Already looks interesting. Quick combat for retainers and troops. The D6 save versus death. This was submitted by Red_Flanagan. Elfbait says, loud and clear. Great. Happy to hear it. Let's see what we have here. Red Flanagan says, it can really drag combat out when there are a bunch of retainers and followers around. They are mostly meat for the grinder, but we roll attacks and damage against them every round. Rather than that, I did some math to figure out what the probability of them being hit and dying in one hit was, on average. So now you can just roll a d6 to see if the retainer or unit, in larger scale engagements, it accounts for different HP and armor against a d6 damage die and flat attack bonus / THAC0. As a result, it's very faithful to OSE, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and Chainmail, but quick with just one die. Check it out. Red shirts and save versus death. Oh, and it has the Vanishing Tower seal of approval. I don't know what that is. Take an upvote. Let's check it out. All right. I'm going to post this in the chat. This is from the Blood, Death, Satan, and Metal blog. Red shirts and save versus death. You want to go there and you're in the chat and you want to follow along and see what I'm seeing. I'm going to post this into my notes if I can find them. There we go. Okay. What can we see? Posted on September 5th, 2021. When there are large quantities of combatants, especially the same type, there's no reason to roll individual attacks and damage, and no reason to keep strict, detailed records of who's dying and who's left. Of course, there's nothing wrong with fighting them normally by making a d20 roll and then rolling damage, but why do that for every combatant when there's a bunch of them? Assuming that they are facing opponents of roughly equal strength, it can be streamlined into a single roll with a little math. Red shirts with low hit points, AB. I don't know what AB means, but AB, maybe they mean AC, low hit points, probably AC instead of AB. I'm guessing. And damage are easy to model, so we can just make a roll for each individual or unit without tracking their hit points if we calculate the chance of them dying from an attack. Thus, they get two states, dead and not dead, or not dead yet. If they fail to save, they are dead. If they succeed, they are either not dead, fully alive, or not dead yet. Reduced strength, suffer a morale check, or other negative effect or complication. Frederick Ork, good morning. Let's see. What is up with all the doom and gloom of the OSRs and lately? I'm not sure. I don't know if I've seen that, but maybe we could talk about it after I get through here. Frederick, if you have a relevant link, drop it in the chat. I'm happy to go take a look if there's something that's representative of OSR doom and gloom. Getting back to this one, though. So we got 3 states, or 2 states, dead and not dead, or not dead yet. And then if they succeed, they're either not dead, fully alive, not dead yet, reduced strength for morale check, or other negative effect or complication. And obviously then there's also dead. Combatants are categorized into a few types to account for different hit points and AC values. 0 HD grunts with no armor, 1 HD troops with leather armor, 1 HD elites, and level 1 fighter super elites with chain. As shown below, this scales nicely with the D6 system, with each category having a 1 point increase and being easy to keep track of. Okay. I'm definitely liking the sound of this, though, of course, if you're going to go to chainmail, they had basically as just a roll 6, a D6 roll itself, with different troop types. I think with light, medium, heavy versus different light, medium, or heavy. And, you can do that, but I kind of like what he's doing here. Well, let's see what he's got individually. I'm going to check this out first, and then I'll come back to potential doom and gloom. I have a feeling it's probably overblown. I also think it's probably different people, but whatever. I don't want to let me not get sidetracked yet. Okay, so for 0 hit die grunts / non-combatant retainers, all but guards, guides, mercenaries, and sailors, 1 hit point, they will die if they're hit, regardless of weapon damage. 45% chance of being hit. In parentheses, we're talking about a 12 armor class. Round up to 50% because they're mooks and have no idea what they're doing when they're in combat. 50% chance of being hit, upon which they will die, equates to a 3 and 6 save versus death. Right? Easy peasy. 1 hit die troops / combatant retainers, guards, guides, mercenaries, and sailors. In that case, they have 2 hit points, 83% chance of death from D6 rolls if they're hit, 35% chance of being hit, which gives it ultimately a 30% chance of being hit than dying, and then we're rounding up because war is hell, which equates to a 4 and 6 save versus death. And the other reason rounding up is convenient because we're in a D6, so you don't have you have a lot. There's a lot of the percentage, right? We've got to match the percentages on a D6. If you use something like a D8, a D10, or D20, you get more granular with the percentages of each die. So a D6, it's something like 16.6666 chance of any individual number, right? And when you get to a D20, it's a flat 5% chance. We get to 1 HD elites, 4 hit points, 50% chance of dying from D6 rolls if they're hit, 25% chance of being hit, 12.5% chance of being hit and dying, and we're rounding up to 17% chance. That's basically a 1 in 6. Because even the best are at the mercy of luck, which equates to a 5 and 6 save versus death. And then level 1 fighter super elites, 8 hit points, the minimum hit points according to character creation. Assuming D6 damage rolls, they will take at least 2 hits to kill, so that's a 25% chance of being hit with a 16 armor class. Probability of them dying in 2 rounds is 40%, 8 or more damage from 2d6, even though the 2d6 is spread out over 2 turns. They have an 83.75% chance when 3d6 is rolled. They're tough bastards, 5 and 6 save, and require 2 fails for them to die. If they're led by someone special, 3 fails. Henchmen should have their own stats. So the first thing I would say is, I really like this. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. There's more. Sorry. There's Guy from, whatchamacallit, I always forget the name of the movie. And I like that movie. Success, to survive, they continue on at full strength. Failure on a failed roll, they're dead. In the case of a unit, casualties are suffered. Optional, you can have casualties, critical success, human shield, morale checks. The D6 damage assumption it gives strong compatibility with BX Raw and OSE options, and the overall hit / kill probabilities are almost entirely in line with chainmail. It's true. These calculations assume they are attacked by characters with no attack bonus, wielding weapons doing D6 damage. Saves can be modified with penalties if they're being attacked by PCs, with significantly higher, again, AB. Attack bonus. Oh, okay. All right. It wasn't a typo for AC. They meant attack bonus. Okay. Took me a bit. A little slow on the uptick there. Okay. They're being attacked by PCs with significantly higher attack bonuses. And here in a blog, please spell it out, right? I've not seen AB used a lot. Maybe it is used on various blogs, and I don't read enough of the blogs, enough to really get it. Just type it out. You're not saving that much. You're not trying to keep it within a certain page length. type it out, save me the trouble of having to try to figure out what AB could mean, or if it's a typo, or if it's something else. Or higher HD monsters. Remember that for every +3 attack bonus, there's an additional 1 in 6 chance of hitting. For most Lamentations PCs, this will barely change things, as they only get a +1 attack bonus, which does not improve. That's assuming they're not a fighter. Yeah, this is good. The one thing, well, there are a couple things I might say. I like this a lot, and yes, keeping it as a D6 does keep it generally compatible with things like chainmail and the kind of D6 rolling of some things. However, I would probably move this to a D20, and the reason being is you can get a little bit more granular. You could probably figure out, for example, for the single 1 HD elites, instead of having to do, or maybe, sorry, for the super elites, instead of having to have tracking them over 2 turns, since the whole point of this thing is that you're kind of making one roll and not tracking them. So the super elites, it breaks down a little bit, but if you had greater range in your probabilities, you could probably figure it out. So if you get a 25% chance of being hit and you need to take 2 hits to kill, but that could also mean potentially, depending on how you do critical hits, maybe you factor in, hey, maybe it's a critical hit. There's also the idea that maybe one of these guys has a bonus to their strength, so it's not just a D6. It could be a D6 plus 2, in which case you do get 8 hit points, right? So you could probably figure out the odds with that D20 range of probabilities. You're kind of limited in what you can do with the D6. And that's the super elite levels where you see that bumping up against that limit. Whereas if you used a larger die, and we're just rolling 1 die and everything else is kind of D20 based, why not just use a D20? But other than that, yeah, that's very, I can see that being very handy. All right, so that was quick combat. Just want to check out the comments. I don't know who Vanishing Tower is, but they did approve. Well, there's not much. Just Scriptorian 2 hours ago, or an hour ago, said, this is interesting read. Skimmed it while at work. We'll read it later. Okay, well, nothing really. Use the system. Nice. Yep. Did I upvote it? I did, and it's got some upvotes. Okay, that's great. So now let me address the, I don't want to say gorilla in the room, or maybe the not in the room. So in the chat, as I was going in there, as Frederick commented, what is up with all the doom and gloom in that the OSR is ending lately? A question which I don't have a particular answer for. I haven't seen it. I've seen things come out with certain personalities, and I don't want to get in. I'm trying to avoid naming names and kind of getting into the muck a luck, but I've seen it where different folks have kind of come out of the woodwork, sort of posting, why can't we all just be friends, or something about nature, and people have posited, depending on how cynical they feel these individuals are being, that if these are true olive branches, or I think more than likely what the scuttlebutt seems to be from the other side is that these guys are finding that their views have put them on the outs with a lot of their potential consumer base, their potential, I can't want to say clients, no, sales. They're losing out, and so they're trying to kind of be, oh, hey, please hate us. And then there was the whole weird thing with the woke or anti-woke company list. It's the ongoing politicization of the OSR. And not that this doesn't happen in other things, but I feel like it's stronger in the OSR because the OSR seems to attract people who play on that. And some of those folks who've been playing on this politicization for their own ends, I think are now coming that some of those things are starting to bite them in their bank accounts, where they're not finding their things maybe being, they're not finding the places that used to be more welcoming to their promotions and things as welcoming, maybe finding that they're not getting the sales or the kind of Kickstarter attention that they used to. And so they are, seem to be kind of rethinking that approach, but people haven't been necessarily very forgiving of it. And, not to say they should be. I have not seen, as Frederick Ork says, several YouTubers have videos lately on it. I tend not to watch a bunch of other YouTubers that are in the space because I don't want, and I've said this before, right? It's not, I don't feel like I'm above them or that somehow I'm better. It's simply that if it's something I feel like I'm going to talk about, I don't want to somehow get their ideas in my brain, which happens, right? I'll see a great video and suddenly I'm thinking along those lines. And then if I do the video on it, I'm thinking, am I just kind of parroting somebody else's idea that came first. So I tend to not watch a lot of those if they're covering subjects and things that I might cover. I haven't seen anything in particular come across my feed, but that obviously doesn't mean they're not there. Elfbait, responding to Frederick, says, it's been my experience that almost any game has people trying to sing its death throes. Generally, it comes down to the experience or opinion of the poster and nothing backed by fact. He also goes on to say, Goodman Games, Frog God, and other major OSR producers seem pretty content with the health of the OSR. I don't think that there's any, yes, and I would agree that I don't think, so there's two things. There's OSR as a marketing phrase, right? And then there are people who are producing content for what we would call OSR. I think OSR has gotten, the name has gotten kind of dragged through the mud a bit over the last couple of years, in particular, not that there were issues beforehand, but certainly over the last couple of years because of, just issues with creators who have gotten in trouble for various reasons, gotten called out for practices, both that were, not really acceptable, right? That we've decided as a society, hey, you shouldn't be doing these things. And there have been several high profile OSR personalities that got caught up in that. And that, of course, tends to give the overall hobby a bit of a black eye. And then there's also this ongoing politicization, like I said, which I think has started with a lot of kind of folks who will use reactionary politics to basically find an audience for their products. And I think, as people have pointed out, when you do that, when you start fracturing the community to try to gain a foothold, sure, you might gain some folks as followers. People become fervent towards you because you're feeding into their beliefs, but you also alienate a bunch of other people. And I think some of that alienation is kind of coming home to roost. So there might be some fallout from that's happening. And then, in addition, there's these weird things like I said, there's that whole woke, anti-woke list, which made zero sense. It doesn't even matter how you want to define woke or not woke. You looked at the things that were like, these are on the lists that are great because they're not political. And there was stuff from people who were clearly super political on there. And it just kind of like, I couldn't read the list and take it seriously, because regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, whether it's political views that you might love or versus them you hate, some of the ones that are on there, you couldn't even argue that they didn't have political views at all, because the list was like, these are the guys who are apolitical. And I'm looking in there like, their whole shtick is being political. So it was just not nonsense, right? But the idea that someone would make such a list, it kind of blows my mind. But this stuff, it only seems, I don't know, this stuff seems to be happening in the OSR space. You don't see it happening. Maybe folks in certain groups have just given up on 5th edition and it would just assume I don't know, whatever they would assume. It's been strange, but I don't have a particular, answer. Maybe I'll have to do some searching and come up, because it is an interesting question. I do think some folks have tried to look at like, I've kind of thought about it that we really should be moving in a post OSR world. At some point the Renaissance ends and you enter in the next phase of whatever that is. And I kind of think that the OSR has ended. The Renaissance has come. It's created this big upswelling of certain game types and rejuvenating these older game styles and all this stuff. It may be time to think about what does the world look like once we move past the OSR. But that's the problem, in a sense, with the OSR being both looking at it on a historical basis as sort of what happened in a certain frame of time, and then it also being this marketing term, right? I don't think people were calling the Renaissance during the Renaissance, right? It was something that historians look back on and said, oh, we shall call this the Renaissance. You didn't have Italian painters advertise themselves as Renaissance painters. They were just Italian painters. It was only later, when people looked back at them, that they trying to find characteristics in common, they grouped everything together, found, oh, this is about when this movement started, and this is where we could see moving on from that, or different directions, or just it seems to be that whatever this upwelling was complete, and then bracket that off and say, hey, this is the Renaissance. But for OSR, it's weird, right? It's both. You can see where it kind of started, and we're probably too close to it to look and see, hey, it's ending right now, but at the same time, we're using it to market. So everything gets confused. Another example I like to bring up is film noir, right? The original film noirs from depending on when you want to date it, from like the late 30s early 40s to the late 50s, and again, depending where you want to date it, to the maybe early 60s. None of the filmmakers working in that time frame, working on the movies, called themselves film noir, acknowledged something called film noir, thought of themselves as some kind of group doing something called film noir. Film noir was a term by French film analysis, the famous, I forget the name of the famous French magazine that was all about films that, looking back at that period, noticed commonalities that put them together. Film noir. Now, kind of film noir, neo-noir has become somewhat of a marketing term, but those original films didn't market themselves as film noir. It was someone looking back again and saying, oh, look at these things they all have in common. We find enough commonalities that seem to stretch between a certain time frame. Hey, that's a movement or something we'll call film noir. So there's OSR, the movement. There's OSR, this marketing thing, identity. And right now they're all confused. I'm sure it'll all shake out in time, but probably the OSR is a label. I'm ready to put it to bed. Basically, I made that video about the OSR in 2021, kind of what is it? And it's sort of confused, and it's hard to find. It's hard to find commonalities between everything that will claim to be OSR and will market as OSR. So it might not even be bad that we move on into maybe more distinctive naming. Elfbait says, what I hope we'll see is old school philosophy with maybe new design concepts, a mix of old attitudes and conventions with modern streamlined mechanics. I think we're finding that already. I think a lot of games, I think when you look at the ones, especially the ones that move more and more away from doing things exactly the way, say, BX did. You look at Troika and games like that, and they don't necessarily always succeed, but they're trying different mechanics. They're doing different things. They may be pulling elements out of other games, even 5th edition. I've seen games adapting the advantage-disadvantage system because it is really handy and easy to use and easy to learn for new folks. So I think that's happening. And just at some point, maybe we stop considering them OSR on some level, and maybe we call it, I don't know, old school philosophy or something. I don't know. It'll shake out eventually. Low Fantasy Gaming made a good attempt at that. Yeah, that's I've heard of that. I haven't really read much of this stuff, but I've seen it around. Yep. That's interesting too, right? Because low fantasy is kind of a genre, right? And when we think about OSR, where another thing that makes it confusing is it can be that genre, but it can also be on the other end of the spectrum, where it's super gonzo, high magic, kind of high craziness, right, everywhere. There's so much going on that I feel like you need like a bunch of different things. Maybe you need to break it out into different things. Here, our genre is low magic fantasy. Our mechanics are sandbox. I mean, the nice thing with OSR is it's kind of that you can say that one thing to somebody. I play an OSR game, or I talk about OSR gaming, and if they'll have some kind of understanding. But at this point, the understanding could be so dilute because are we talking about old school, 0 edition 3 brown books? Or are we talking about Troika? Are we talking about something even further afield? It's just so broad now that I find that even saying just OSR kind of isn't enough. I kind of end up having to say like OSR D&D or BX inspired OSR, something like that. All right. Let's put that aside for now. It's the question without end. I'm just going to give this a quick refresh just in case somebody... All right, so we got a merchant PC class. I'm willing to read some merchant PC class. These always give me pause. Well, I'm not going to say why they give me pause, but we'll read through, see what it has. So this class is a merchant. No requirements. Charisma is their prime requisite. Makes sense. D4 hit die, maximum level 14. Armor, leather, shields, weapons, any one-handed. Languages, common, plus whatever alignment language. Experience as a thief. Okay, so these guys will advance fairly quickly. Elfbait says, thanks for touching on that. No problem. I'm happy to go on whatever diversions, I'm happy to diverge to cover something that is a worthwhile topic. And I think that is a worthwhile discussion. I just maybe need some more data, or again, if somebody could pull up something more specific, if someone could find some kind of blog entry or something that we could substantive that we could read, I'm happy to read it, and then we can give us something more context to talk about it. All right, back to the merchant. So the merchant, no requirements. Charisma is the prime rec. D4 hit dice. Level 14 maximum. Armor. They can use leather and shields. My first impulse is why the shields. I guess shields are kind of, you think maybe easy to use? I'd probably scrap the shields. Maybe I'd give them something else. Weapons, any one-handed. I might limit that more, but that's me being a curmudgeon. Languages, I would give them extra languages. I might say that maybe they. So here's an interesting thing, right off the bat, and this is not anything necessarily wrong with it so far. Again, I'm just riffing on what I read. But you think of merchants, yes, charisma, certainly. You think of a salesperson style merchant, you might think charisma is it. I'd also think intelligence, right? And with intelligence comes languages. The way the game works. Maybe you might disagree, but that's the way the game is. So I might give some extra languages in here. And I think we can all say that if you've ever been to, say, a third world country or not even a third world country, anywhere that relies a lot on tourism, you'll see all kinds of people, regardless of their education or how much book learning they have, pick up a bunch of languages because they have to deal with a lot of different people. And so I think that a merchant, I'd want to buff up those languages. So I'm not sure how I do that. My first thought was, maybe double their intelligence bonus, right? So if you have intelligence of +2, you're at the high end of the spectrum, you get 4 languages instead of 2 or whatever it would be on that table. I don't know if it's exactly 1-to-1 with the bonus, but, double your intelligence in languages. So I might even say then have like 2 prime requisites. Maybe your primary one is charisma, your secondary intelligence, and then do something there. Because I want to express that concept of merchants being well-traveled. They may not be well-educated, but just having to deal with people, you gotta speak their languages. And experience as a thief, that's great, because I think that makes sense in terms of OSR, because thieves, not the strongest class, right? They have their niches in which they can perform well, but especially depending on how you run their skills, can be more powerful or weaker, but they level up quickly. Juan Cholo says, merchant like Torneco Taloon from Dragon Quest IV. I'm not, you know what? I've played a couple of the Dragon Quest games just a little bit, so I'm not familiar with Torneco Taloon, but I gotta say, I love the name. So I wish I could follow that reference. Oh, wait a minute. Looks like they're going to get some languages stuff. See, maybe I should have kept reading first. All right, the first paragraph says, merchants recognize that trade and commerce are the lifeblood of civilizations. Oh, you know what I'll also do? Hold on. Let me post this into the chat. Merchant class. All right, so if you're in here, you can follow along. Sorry, it is a really long Google Doc link. If I had forethought, I would post that. I'd go that through my URL shortener, but if you're in the chat, you should be. Hopefully, you can click on it. Merchants recognize that trade and commerce are the lifeblood of civilization. They seek to expand the reach of markets and establish networks of thriving trade. Lawful merchants may wish to help and aid societies, whereas chaotic merchants may act like despots and miserly tyrants seeking to control people. I would actually say that both of those are lawful. It's really the axis they're talking about here is good and evil, because despots and miserly tyrants controlling people are still, if you're using kind of law and order in their, what's the word I want to say, in their, not sort of as the cosmic teams, but in their literal senses, then that's just two sides of the law coin, right? Someone who is wishing to help and aid people and strengthen society is working on law. They're building up those connections and reinforcing them. And someone who wants to create their own little empire is also working with order, just on the negative side of order more than the positive one. A chaotic merchant might be one that wants to, what do they say in sort of tech, be a disruptor, come in and take a market and just blow it up. Not blow it up necessarily physically, though that could be it. Somebody come in, create a whole craze, create a tulip craze, and then get out before the whole thing collapses, right? So you're taking an orderly situation and you're creating kind of chaos, making money off it, and then bailing out before the chaos kind of collapses in on itself. That's what I would see as a chaotic merchant. The vast majority of merchants are neutral. They are in it purely for the money. Well, that's not necessarily neutral, but sure. Again, they're working on that good. I suppose if you're working on the good, evil, neutral, that would be potentially neutral. But you can be in it for the money and be evil. You can even be in it for the money, but still be good in your own way. Languages. Due to their time around people from all backgrounds and walks of life, a merchant of appropriate intelligence may learn alignment tongues other than their own. I wouldn't give them that. In addition to any other languages in the campaign, the starting merchant gains one bonus language of their choice. I would bump up those bonus languages and take out the alignment tongue. I think the alignment tongue is special if I was going to have it in my game at all. So I would not give it to them. That to me is just above and beyond. It's something that's quasi-mystical. It's tied to this basic essence of your soul. And so you can't just learn it. So I wouldn't give them that, but I would give them more regular languages. Rumor monger. A savvy merchant knows the benefits of gossip and rumors. Whenever a merchant attempts to find or locate rumors, they find one more than they normally would to a minimum of 2 rumors. That's a good one. I mean, that's like a GM's friend right there. Exchequer's table. During downtime after an adventure, typically before bedtime, okay, a merchant will spend a few hours before bedtime. So that doesn't give them much time to do much else. Methodically appraising new or existing treasure for his party. A merchant will automatically know the value of all non-magical items worth 100 GP or less in his possession. Every 2 levels, the merchant increases the appraisal amount by 100 gold pieces. Okay, so this means that a 3rd level merchant may automatically appraise items of 200 gold pieces or less. A 5th level merchant, 300 gold pieces or less. So I would probably do this a little bit differently. I like the idea. I like the idea of having an appraiser on hand. Goodness knows my party would love to have a hands-on appraiser that travels with them. Let's see. Wancholo says, alignment issues for using the law neutral chaos 3-point alignment versus the 9-point law neutral chaos by good neutral evil system. I think this was written using the 3-point system. I think it was, Wancholo. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was. But the context he's using when he's talking about what it means to be lawful or chaotic actually seems to be more good and evil. Because if you're looking at law being that you could be good or evil, that law isn't good or evil, it just kind of is, and you're looking at it more in the what it means practically speaking, law is all about, ordering things, and being a despot is still order. It is still all about order. Chaos in that sense is about blowing up order. It's about reducing order to nothing, and becoming a despot or some kind of empire lord is not blowing up order. It is just the flip side of being a good side of order, right? Instead of it's a negative type of order, but it's still order, at least the way I see it. But alignment, we could do a whole thing on alignment. So I like the Exchequer's table. I would probably say if they spend a night with the goods, right, then you could use that downtime. They spend a night with the goods. That will so they have the goods in their possession overnight. We can then just abstract that away as yes, they've gone through checking it. Other than that, I like it, but I wouldn't just say automatically. You got to look at it. Got to get out your little glass. Maybe you could even have some kind of kit. A book of values or something to compare metals or some little an appraiser's kit, right? You have all kinds of kits, right? Little thieves' tools and other tools. Why not there be an appraiser's kit that's got a little scale and maybe some way of trying to check out the density? If you're seeing something of gold, is it just gold plate versus is it solid? What's underneath? Is it silver? Is it some other metal? Maybe they have some ways of testing it. Yeah, play it up a little bit. But I do like that, generally speaking. I think that's a cool ability. Next one is the Silk Road. A shrewd merchant at all times fosters a sprawling network of contacts, fixers, and local guides. Whenever a merchant enters a city, hamlet, or village, they can establish themselves with local tradesmen, vendors, and other merchants over the course of 1d4 days. After this time, whenever they attempt to buy or sell a good, recruit someone, or purchase a service, they treat the market class of that location as being 1 point better. And they say, see table 35, Into the Wild, page 140. I don't know what Into the Wild is. My tendency here would be to tie the number of days to the size of the settlement. Maybe if it's just a little hamlet, only take a day. Just there's not that many people. And you go to the capital, might take 2d4 days or 3d4 days to actually get around and meet everybody and find everybody and do all that. After that, I don't know what the market class does, so I might need to figure that out. But I like the idea that they can establish themselves and maybe smooth over some butter some palms, smooth things out. A sample market class has been reproduced below as a rough guide. For ease of use, consider the sale or purchase of an item or service above the cost given to be extremely difficult given the location. Players without a merchant would have a difficult time trying to pawn 1,000 gold piece emerald in a large village. Just because the price of a riding horse is too high for a small village doesn't mean there aren't horses in the village. It just means for the most part nobody is willing to sell one. Okay, so a sample market classes. All right, so if you're in a hamlet, so the idea is if you're in a hamlet, you're going to have a hard time unloading anything more. That's more. I don't know if they mean this just for, maybe it's for buying and selling. You're going to have a hard time buying or selling anything above 10 because it just isn't there. But if you have a merchant with you, you can get up to 25 gold pieces. I mean, it's interesting, right? I don't know if I love it or not. It's certainly a way to do it. I can't argue with it at the moment, just because I'd have to kind of see it in action. Does it mean, I'm kind of wondering, what does that look like? Does it look like that, yeah, that you can talk people into selling something that they don't want to sell for the money? Or is it that it just isn't there? Because if you look at a hamlet and you say, I want to buy a riding horse, and they go, sorry, we don't have them. Yes, there are horses in the village. They might not be riding horses. Nobody might have literally riding horses. They might have work horses. They might have horses good for pulling wagons, and they ride them. Yes, but is it a riding horse? No, because they don't. A horse that is just for riding has no use in that village, that hamlet. It's just, what am I going to do with it? I only ride the thing once or twice, if at all, because if I'm going to market, maybe I've got the horse pulling the cart with my market goods to sell. I'm not riding anything. I'm walking next to the horse. I only have the one. And if it's purely a riding horse, it's no good to me. So literally, their one doesn't exist. If that's the take, that one doesn't exist, then I don't think a merchant, magically makes one appear. If it is that there's stuff that's there, but it's too dear to sell, and that your merchant can kind of talk them into selling it, then that's interesting, and maybe it makes more sense. But I'd want to figure out kind of what it means. Elfbase says, villager. Well, you can ride any horse. Right. You can ride my workhorse. You can ride this old nag. You can build a pony, but it's not a riding horse, which in the book has specific stats, aka it's like Paul Revere's horse or some other famous messenger horse. It is built for speed, and in environments like hamlets that are all about farming and other labor, there may literally be no use for that kind of horse. And then there's more. The black market. Once per session, a merchant may skirt the rules and attempt to sell, trade, or buy an item on the black market. This permits them to ignore the market class for that item or transaction only at the DM's discretion. The player rolls an unmodified reaction roll to determine what becomes of the transaction. Poor or hostile rolls indicate that it may have been a setup, a robbery, or that the player is given a bad deal. Neutral rolls indicate that the local authorities, a rival party, or the Thieves Guild have taken notice of them. A good roll indicates that the merchant may breathe easy. The transaction went off without a hitch. I like that too. I don't know if I'd want to parse it out a bit more, but that's a cool idea. It says riding horses are military noble stock. Yeah, they are bred for specific purposes that in a medieval setting, most townsfolk are going to have no use for at all. That's for the folk who can afford to have horses for pulling carts, war horses, and then horses for getting places quickly. If you're just a dirt farmer, if that horse can't do things like pull your plow or pull your cart or do some other day-to-day service, it's just for riding, it's no good to you. No good at all. So there's the black market. I like it. I might want to tie it in to the size of the village because Hamlet might not have a black market, but of course we might think about what it means. Maybe there's one guy in the village that's got some money and he's kind of on the down low, or they're on the down low, and so you can kind of get with them maybe. But I like the concept. Read languages. This ability works exactly as the thief ability of the same name and is also granted at 4th level. Just for a little bit of niche protection, I might bump it so the thief gets it slightly ahead of the merchant, or something else, or maybe I just decide that read languages is more of a merchant ability, and so I give it to them a little bit ahead because it does make sense. Merchants would be able to read. You kind of got to be able to read to do your ledgers and things properly, so maybe it makes sense, but maybe limit it. I probably wouldn't give them, if your thieves get at some point to be able to read magic languages, I would not give it to merchants, probably, at least the way I'm thinking of them. Scroll use works as the thief ability, the same name, is also granted at 10th level. I'm not sure I would give them this either. I don't know. I mean, I guess you could argue you're buying and selling things, so you got to kind of, you're going to run into situations where you might get scrolls you want to sell, so you need to kind of identify them in a sense. I don't know. I mean, you're getting it at 10th level, so you're getting it at a pretty high level, but I guess presumably is that when thieves get it as well? I'd have to go back and check when thieves get it. It seems like it's at the same level. I don't want to take too much. I want to have that little bit of, I want to give the thieves a little bit of niche protection if I feel like that's more their thing than the merchant's thing, or give it to the merchants a little bit easier if I'm going to say about this that, hey, I want to give this as a marquee ability. But they have quite a few, though they're situational abilities, they got some nice stuff going on. I mean, it's mostly downtime kind of stuff, but still, it's nice. And then a merchant's trading house. At 9th level, a merchant can establish a trading house, attracting 2d6 merchants of 1st level and double the amount of 0 level men and women interested in trade and commerce. All may be employed at the standard rate. The merchant's trading house raises the market class of any city or village by 1. Multiple merchant trading houses cannot collectively raise the market class by more than 2, regardless of how many are operating out of a given city. So this is nice. All right. I think this is a very nice. I'll go back to what my fear was. So I've seen this a lot with stuff. I mean, to call it 5th edition. It's just when I read the 5th edition stuff and I see a lot of custom classes. You run into that stuff that I feel like is characterized by the D&D wiki kind of thing, where you'll take it could be any occupation. In this case, say merchant, and suddenly they've got all kinds of crazy combat abilities, and you see them strain to make the fiction of a merchant fit something that's some kind of, juggernaut destroyer of worlds, something like, I don't know, cook the books, and it's flame, and the merchant reads from his shopping list, and suddenly people are bursting in flames, Silk Road, wraps 2d6 targets in silk, it's like, oh, okay. It just gets kind of silly, right? And the idea of what the thing you started with is, you just took it kind of as a name, and everything else is just kind of crazy abilities. This takes it pretty much the exact other opposite tack, which I appreciate a lot. And kudos to the creator. They have totally gone and said, look, it's a merchant. It doesn't, and there's no combat abilities. D4. It's not strong. It's not going to hold up in combat. I'm not sure how many players would want to play it, though I can see its usefulness to the party. When I read those abilities, I guess I'll just go back to it quickly since I dropped it. If I read through these abilities, having extra languages, being able to get extra rumors, being able to appraise treasure, being able to establish networks, being able to get better deals, and end game stuff of languages and scroll use probably don't come into into that. That's end game stuff, and who knows if you get there. But even just those first few things, it looks like you get all front loaded. At first level, I think you get all of those. Then that's a really great class. You might ask, are these people ever going into a dungeon, or why are they traveling with adventures? Are they just buying and selling goods? That's a fair question, right? As a merchant, we don't have a hook here to say, why are you adventuring, other than it's just to uncover new resources. How do you get ahead? As a merchant, everyone else has got the standard trade routes, everything locked down. There's too much competition. So what are you doing? You're going out in the wilderness to try to find things. Elfbait has another. Let's see, Elfbait, what you got? Let's get over there. Elfbait says, the only issue I would have with this class is that it mitigates much of what a party spends money and time on, and might change the feel of playing an OSR game. Yes, it does. And I think that's where I would try to adjust some of the stuff. I think it's okay, though, right? Because this is their class's thing. And if their thing is, hey, I can get slightly better deals, that's good, because they're investing all their things into it. And it doesn't change the calculus that much. So, yeah, they don't have to go. If you're having them spend money on appraising goods, sure, they don't have to spend that money anymore. But for a lot of the other stuff, it's just giving them a little bit more options, or maybe they can spend a little bit more money, or maybe they can do a little bit more, but it's not undoing it, right? This is not the Goodberry problem, where if you have Goodberry, then suddenly they don't have to worry about ever foraging for food, right? It's not that. It just allows them to maybe punch above their weight class slightly in some of these downtime things. Juan Cholo says, this would be an interesting character to roleplay. It is definitely a support character, or maybe this character as a henchman. Yeah, I could definitely see players wanting to pick these guys up as retainers or henchmen, minions, someone you could have with you, someone you could keep at home. It would be interesting to roleplay. I'm not sure in the dungeon setting what they're going to do, because you really just have to protect them. They don't even have, so this is where something I would say, they don't even have, I guess any one-handed, maybe you could use throwing axes, slings. It doesn't specifically say melee, so I guess you could try to put them in the back line or in the middle and have them just fling stones at people. But even with the leather and shield, right, they're not going to hold up. They've got D4 hit dice, so they're, for at least a couple levels, they're one hit away from dying almost all the time. Juan Cholo says, hi, we've been trying to reach you about the extended warranty on your warhorse. Yes. Hey, that riding horse you bought at that village? Turns out it was a mule. Too bad you didn't let me appraise that mule before you bought it. That's why we have horse facts. Get the facts on your horse with horse facts. Yeah, indeed. Right. There could be a lot of fun stuff with it. I wonder who's going to play this, because when you're in town, it's great. Though maybe I would say, to kind of in almost the inverse of what Elfbait was saying, it may be that because their stuff is all downtime related and it is kind of situational or sort of fractional. Okay, so great, you get to raise this market class up a one, but how much is that going to matter, particularly early on, especially if you're getting a lot of loose coin as treasure and not stuff? It makes more sense. If I was going to have the merchant in my game, I would want to make sure that a lot of the loot the party is getting is not coin. It's gems or items, things that they're going to have to fence or somehow convert, because that makes that raising the market class values a lot more useful. If you're just getting loose coin, then you're not allowing that Silk Road ability to really function that well. Same thing for the checkers table. If they have easy ways to appraise their items, then that doesn't become very meaningful either. It's a little bit more convenient, but it doesn't really change it, because you're doing downtime anyway. So if you have to spend a day, you just say, I go to the appraiser first and then I go do my shopping, it doesn't really change the calculus much. Whereas if either it's hard to get things appraised, if you're in a ham or small village, there's nobody who can appraise things. Maybe people can't even appraise things above the market class. I might have to work that market class into more elements of the mechanics, so that I say, okay, that if you want something that's worth a ton of gold, the only people that can appraise it are in the capital, because they're the only ones that have been seen anything near 10,000 gold pieces. So the best you could do is if you go to one of these other places, they're going to say, wow, this is I don't know what it is. It's pricey, but I can't really tell you because it's above. It's too fancy for me. And then you got to find the next larger city and go. Maybe then some of that stuff makes more sense. So I might want to thought what gives off a merchant vibe, but has more of that I want to go into danger kind of thing. Would you call it a treasure hunter? Would you call it everybody's a treasure hunter though, so maybe that doesn't make sense. I'm not sure. Would you want to call it like a pawn star or something? I don't know. Storage warrior. Because there aren't ruins and dungeons, kind of just storage wars are just very old. I don't know. I might want to tweak the flavor to give it some bit of a more adventurous feel, though in fiction there's plenty of examples of merchants who had to muck it up and get their hands dirty. But it's definitely interesting, and I really appreciate that they really stuck with the theme of the class. This is a merchant. It is not something else dressed up as a merchant. John Lennon says NPC character or skills and feats. Yeah, there's that too. See, Elfbait says the original publication of the Anti-Paladin, for example, was published as an NPC class. Yep, that's also true. Juan Cholo says, would Marco Polo be considered an adventuring merchant? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, absolutely. And he definitely went, especially if you read his, his autobiography, all kinds of crazy, wild adventures that they went on. It'd be interesting to look at somebody like Marco Polo and read through their, the fictions that he told about himself and see what kind of abilities would come from that. But I definitely like where they're going for it. Elfbait says, how about changing it to the peddler and build on the traveling merchant? Yeah, peddler could be good. It's interesting because like I said, I don't think it's bad as a class. I just wonder who's going to look at that and say, "Ooh, I want to play it," because all their abilities are downtime, and in the dungeon, it's tough, right? It's hard for them, and then hard for the party because if you have a party of 5 and you take one of those 5, you're basically saying, because they will never pick up anything more in combat, right? They are, depending on what advancement, just attack bonus enhancement you have. If you're using like the lamentation system, where it's if you're not a fighter, you basically just get +1 and you're done. They're not going to get much better in combat. They're not going to get a lot of hit points. They can't. I didn't say that there were any restrictions on magic items, so maybe you can try to magic item them up to get them more protected. Elfbait says Columbus was a traveling merchant too. Yeah, there's certainly examples of them, right? Though they were at like Marco Polo wasn't, or at least I don't recall, but right, Columbus had a whole crew, which you can have as the merchant, but you got to get to 9th or 10th level or whatever it is to unlock the crew. Maybe you allow them to have extra hirelings and things because they can caravan it up. That might be a nice ability, because then if you give them a bunch of hirelings and then you let them control them, because I usually don't. I usually control my hirelings in my game because I want to roll morale and I want to roll that stuff. But maybe you give the merchant some more control over some fine-grained control over their hirelings, and they can hire more of them. Maybe they could double whatever their charisma is in hirelings they're allowed to have something, and then they could use those in combat so that they're not necessarily getting in dirty themselves, but they have 3 or 4 guys who are on his payroll, basically on their payroll, that they can do that, and that gives them some combat abilities. Might be a way to do it. Might have to think upon it some more. John Lyon says D&D shouldn't be Oregon Trail or Merchant Prince. Use NPCs and keep it abstract. That's certainly a way to do it, right? And that's kind of how they did it originally, sort of pre-thief, right? You would go get a locksmith to pick the locks if you desperately needed a lock picked. Elfbait says, treat them like a magic user, but their magic is money. Oh, they can buy and sell on the magic stock market. All right. Did I upvote that? I did. That was good. All right. What else have we got here? All right. So I'm just going to upvote Xenopus Archives because I like their stuff. Gauging interest in homebrew, OSR Session Zero. Let's take a look at OSR Session Zero. This was posted by Nonsense Nick. OSR Session Zero. A lot of OSR play seems to be pretty easy to jump in and get started playing. That's one of its biggest advantages, in my opinion. With other styles of games, a session zero is common to connect character backstories and establish expectations for the tone and story. And as the story is meant to be emergent rather than pre-planned in OSR play, and since character backstories are given less attention in lieu of just playing the character how you envision, often without more than a sentence or two of backstory, are session zeros common in your OSR games? If you do use them for OSR play, what kind of things do you handle and discuss? Is it usually a full session, or do you take out a chunk of session one to talk it out? I mean, this is a really good question. I think I've done a video. I know I've talked about session zero at various times. I think just independent of any game you're playing, I think whether you feel like you can get it all done in a chunk of time in session one, or whether you feel like you need all the time to or you need all time one session to get everything together, I think it's always good to sit down and make sure everybody's on the same page. As we have discussed earlier in this stream, and apologies if you're listening to the cut up version, so you'll only get this bit and not hear that. We talked about how OSR as a term is ridiculously broad, and people can have very different understandings of what an OSR game is. I think it's probably good to set your expectations. And even with an OSR, you can be Gonzo, you can be low magic, you can be high magic, you can be Game of Thrones style low fantasy, you could be high fantasy like Lord of the Rings, you can be somewhere in between, you could be Arthurian, you could be science fantasy. There's a whole spectrum of play out there. And I think you want your players to have a grasp of what that is. They're obviously going to be table rules. You're going to want to set up guidelines. You might want to set up things how you're going to handle attendance, things of that sort. There's nothing saying that in your OSR game you can't have more involved backstories if you want. And some players enjoy making backstories, even if they're not strictly required by whatever you consider your generic OSR to be. So I'll say it's never a bad idea to have a session zero. These are where you can cover what rule set you're using, your house rules, if you have them, what your playable classes are, what your alignment system is and how it works, how magic works. And by magic works, I mean, are you using, out of the book, whatever your out of the box magic system is? Are you substituting another magic system? Are you rolling randomly for starting spells? Do you get to pick out your starting spells? Anything of that sort. Obviously, what kind of creatures can you play as a player? Are there all the classes? Which books can I use? Some GMs might be super open and say, hey, any OSR, whatever, say anything that's compatible with old school essentials or BX, you can bring in, I will use. Or maybe we're using, was it GLOG, which has a whole plethora, a ridiculous amount of content for that. Are we doing something in the Lamentations kind of universe and some of their stuff? Are we using black powder weapons like you can use in Lamentations? Are we playing in the Bronze Age? Are we playing in medieval times? What are things like? Who are the gods? If I'm a cleric, what gods can I choose? Are there any domains that I can't use, et cetera, et cetera? So I think there's a lot of stuff you can outline, both on a meta level of just how you want your table play to be, what responsibilities that as a GM that you're saying that you have, what responsibilities as players are going to have, and then of course all the stuff about your game. Depending on your OSR game, this can be very short conversations. Hey, we're playing BX, everything in the basic set you can do with maybe this exception. Here's how we're going to roll for money. Here's how we're going to do your starting kit. Here's where you're going to start your starting town. Here's what you know, that kind of thing, right? But I think it's never a bad idea if you have the time. I think you should actually say, even if you don't have the time, make the time to do it. I don't think it's never going to feel, I think, wasted to have a session zero. And you can often kick yourself when you run into differences of expectations later on. Why didn't I have session zero and cover that stuff? Oval Team Patrol, going back to the merchant, says Money Mancy. Yeah, that I do like that. I do like that a lot. So session zero, yes, always a positive. And you could determine how much, and it'll take some time. You might want to set aside a whole session for it. And then if it's fast, if you realize, oh, I had 3 hours and we spent an hour talking it out and getting everything settled and everyone's quick on the take and they got down and maybe they've made their characters already, or maybe you can sit down and do characters together. whatever it is, and then that's done in half an hour or whatever that takes. You have an hour and a half or 2 hours left. You want to start playing? Great, start playing. Or you use the whole session, and you know it. So I think I would say you build it in, use the time, use however much time you need to get all the messaging out, make sure everybody stands, make sure everybody's on the same page. And then if you can start play. Then if you feel like, well, we're out of time, then just take it up on the next session. Let's see. Folks in my chat, if you have your own thoughts on OS Session Zeros for OSR, let me know. Let me see what do our fellow Redditors say. 3bar says, generally I use Session Zero as a sort of thesis statement. We'll go over expectations for character types and setting specific stuff, such as whether magic exists or what form it takes. I'll then give them the slightly longer version of the elevator pitch and maybe a crash course in the setting specifics so they can make informed decisions about what their characters would feasibly know. Yep, those are all good, excellent points. And then quoting the original poster about how much time, he says it really depends on the type. They say it really depends on the kind of game. If we're doing beer and pretzel style, maybe a half hour at most. If it is something that may require political maneuvering, intrigue, or the literal lay of the land, maybe an entire session, but generally not. I'll give that an upvote. Seems like good advice. Thror the Second says, we use Session Zero to establish house rules, expectations, etc. More of housekeeping than a true Session Zero. I'll give that an upvote. And then, Camel My Camel says, for campaigns, I spend the first 10 to 20 minutes of Session 1. Since it's OSR, it's more about establishing tone and genre than building character backstories. I typically ask everyone to go around and talk briefly about a piece of fiction in fantasy or sci-fi that they enjoy recently. I like that touch. Then I ask about what they'd like to see in this game, and then I ask what they don't want to see. Every so often, I'll formally check back in with people and see how things are going for everyone. I also what people are enjoying or not enjoying. I also ask what people are enjoying or not enjoying at the end of every session. Overall, lots of communication. For one-shots, I decide what the tone and genre are ahead of time so players know. Yep, that's all good. So yeah, standard. I think that's good stuff. Session Zero is very handy. I can't imagine anyone would be against it. Just build it in, and if you don't need all the time, then you use the time for something else. Otherwise, you have that time. All right, how are we looking on our time? All right, let me see if I can get one more in here. We're already over the hour, but when has that stopped me before? Don't answer that, anybody. Okay, looking for feedback / input on OSR inspired attributes for tactical sci-fi game. I'll skip that one for now. That might be too involved. How much do you actually try out playing different systems? As much as I can, but that doesn't necessarily mean that much. Here we go. All right, here's a good one. From Axion Spice. My man, my guys over at Axion Spice. All right. I've looked at some of their stuff. They were kind enough to send me some of their material, which I need to go back and look. I actually have 2 more that they sent me that I need to go back and check out. I think I might have mentioned this. I'm going to try to... Last time I went through the Land of Legends, you can see it here referenced on the blog. If you're watching this, if you're listening to it, they did the Land of Legends, a set of all these encounters and things, books, tables. I kind of read the first... I read 2 of them sort of in my standard... just reading through, but I think for the other 2, I'm actually going to try to build some things with it and try that approach, more of a practical approach. But let me link out to this. This is at the Axion Spice blog, and I keep wanting to call them Axion Space. I don't know. It's about, I don't know. I just get this Dune vibe. Let's see. Treasure in OSE. Okay, I'm just gonna. That's close enough. All right. There we go. There's the link. Feel free to hop in there if you're in the chat and follow along. Posted yesterday, Thursday, September 9, 2021, by Giuseppe Rotondo. Thanks for using your real name or using some other nom de plume that's consistent. I don't know why, but I'm bothered when I go to a blog and there's no name attached. It's like these weird, anonymous authors. At least use your handle, your internet handle, if you don't want to give out your name. Like other posts, this article takes old school essentials for reference, but can be applied to most retro clones. Random treasure generation is a staple of most early editions of D&D. Big emphasis on random. Those tables may as well create non-existent hordes, or at the other end of the spectrum, mountains of gold and jewels and magic items all in the same place. The mechanical procedures for random treasure generation are really awful and long, and it is much better to use an online generator such as the one Necrotic Gnome offers on their site. To some, that's a great feature. To others, less so. A lot depends on your playstyle, especially on how fast your game goes. If the group discovers a treasure hoard every 3 sessions and it's 100 copper pieces because that's what you rolled, that's one thing. If in 3 sessions they put their hands on, say, 9 randomly rolled hoards, then things even out much better. For referees who don't like random or too much random, the Old School Essentials book lists average values for each treasure type, a simple feature which I had never found in other books, and one that really helps as a starting point if you want to manually determine or adjust treasure. Consequences of random. Random treasure adds another level of thrill to the game, one that is definitely not there if you always go with the average treasure value. On a psychological level, it may probably generate the same kind of addiction of instant lotteries. A lesson action RPG video games such as Diablo have learned well. Oh, Diablo. Oh, Diablo. You could be a tough mistress. A randomly rolled poor horde is a disappointment for the players, true, and definitely, quite literally, adds nothing to the game, except a lesson learnt. If you want treasure, you should follow rumors about treasure, not rush into every goblin lair on the map. This is very true. At the other hand, a superb roll may mean 2 things. Fast-forward advancement for the PCs, and probably the introduction of some crazy magic item you wouldn't have put in there if you had manually chosen the treasure, which is an awesome thing. It has a chance to inject the campaign with freshness, take the immersive story into wild new directions. Even if you use the average value, adjusting it with a fast roll will still make things more thrilling. Something like roll a d6. If it's even, the treasure is smaller than average. If it's odds, it's larger, and a d100 to find out the percentage of the increased/decreased value. The really dramatic roll in those treasure tables is the chance for magic items and their nature. A wider perspective. Randomly rolled treasure is integral to the quote-unquote by-the-book game experience. The game where you follow all the rules has a chance for you to live the story of the outcast freak with no score above 11 who somehow got a sentient sword and a flying carpet during his 2nd session. The more you exclude random from the game, the less chances it has to surprise and entertain you as a group. And a different take. Random treasure as a story tool. Rolling for treasure should never be done during play. The referee really needs to know if the Goblin King possesses potions or enchanted gear because he sure is going to use them in battle. So rolling treasure and accepting the result can be an awesome starting point in designing your adventure or dungeon. 0 treasure might mean a lot of things, and all of them can expand your scenario beyond that starting idea. Someone more powerful extorted it for protection, a dragon, for example, or a more powerful dragon. Someone cleverer stole it, and a poor Goblin King might still be unaware of the theft. It was all spent to fuel a specific endeavor such as a war, crusade, journey, construction, ritual, peace treaty, or dowry. In other words, the treasure isn't there because it's somewhere else. Finding out about it and getting there might very well be the party's next adventure. What about lots of treasure? That might be the sign of a very clever creature, one that is not like the rest of its kin. Your Goblin King has a businessman attitude, or powerful allies, or a generous patron, or is more powerful, or has studied magic, or it might just be a bunch of gobos who stole from their king and are now on the run. The biggest question here is, where has that treasure come from? Whose gold was it? What are they going to do about it? Here's a hook for a quest, or the input for adding a second faction of monsters in the scenario. Magic items further shake things up. It's not just the old, give the Gnoll boss the axe +2 you rolled. The axe +2 is the type of item the Gnolls get when you pick treasure manually. Now consider this. You've just mapped and stocked your run-of-the-mill orc lair. But then, boom, you roll treasure and they get an elemental summoning device, a Ifriti bottle, Horn of Blasting, or Drums of Panic. That's no longer the raid the dungeon scenario you were designing. That's a cooler one, where those orcs are up to something bigger, subduing other humanoids and boldly raiding villages with their special toy. The ogre who put the Helm of Alignment changing on is now held prisoner by his clan and might become an ally of the party. What about a sentient sword popping into the kobold's hoard you prepared as your very first dungeon? Just remember that Bilbo got the one ring from a bizarre random encounter while in a cave. Let the thing shape your campaign. Think of how it got there, what its goal is, and let the rest of the campaign surprise you. With the asterisk, works better if you have an actual campaign rolled outline. I should make a post about that. Well, first of all, before I get to the chat, I think this is an excellent article, and not just because of some contact with Axion Spice. I think it's very well done. I think the idea of rolling your treasure in advance, if you can, and then having that add context to the place or the thing is really an excellent idea. I love the fact that this concept that, hey, you roll with what you get, right? If you come up with something crazy, think about that. The crazy thing factors in. Think about who had it, who has it now, who used to have it, who has it now, what are they doing with it? Don't just have it sit in the back of the cave, right? Or it could be that they don't know what they have, like the trolls in The Hobbit, who didn't know they were sitting on these really fancy elven swords. They just had kind of stuck it in the back of their cave. It wasn't really much use to them. Too small, can't use it. But of course, for the hobbits, they were Sting being a knife, but made a perfect hobbit sword, stuff like that. But yeah, I think this is really good. And I know there were some comments in the chat, so I will hit that up now. But I don't really have anything bad to say. I think this is all excellent advice. Let me know in the chat if you guys got other. John Lennon says, in the old days, I mean my grandfather, never had session zeros or backstories. You showed up with a character or rolled one on the fly. There weren't many options and started playing. Everyone GM generic console stuff. Oh, going back to the other thing. Yes. So, yes, going back to the other points or the other bit we were talking about. Yeah, that's a fine way to do it. Two, I think, again, because OSR is so broad, there wasn't that many choices, right? You were playing, for the most part, playing D&D. Everyone understood implicitly what D&D is. There wasn't that much going on. Now, the width and breadth of OSR, I think, dictates that you have to be a little bit more specific, a little bit more granular in your approach. I mean, you could just say, hey, I'm playing vanilla basic expert. Here's the basic expert book, or get OSE free version. That's what we're playing with. Your choices are the choices that are in there. We're playing in a world and whatever, and then go, right? You could do that, but I think there's nothing wrong with having a little bit more. I mean, yes, we used to be able to do that stuff, but that was what everyone basically was playing, essentially the same D&D, pretty much. With exceptions, obviously, and people homebrewed stuff, obviously, made worlds, obviously, but there was a lot less different things going on. So, but now back to this random treasure. I agree with everything here. I think it's very good stuff to keep in mind. Let the treasures you roll up really inform the locations from the creatures. I do think that you get better stuff. I think that ultimately what I love about random generation, I've said this before, is you get to be surprised. As a GM, you get to be surprised by things. You thought this was just an orc cave. Suddenly, the orcs got some special item. Now you have this orc with a horn of blasting, these orcs with it. Now, what do they do with it? What does that say about them? It's not something I would have given them if I had picked it, but now they've got it. And how does that change the encounter? How does that change how they are in the fiction? What are they using that horn for? Right? What does the party can learn about that? What are people saying about it? Are they extorting villages because they're coming with the horn and like the walls of Jericho just blowing everything down with it? All kinds of possibilities. As he points out, Bilbo, if you want to look at Gollum as a random encounter, then Bilbo got this powerful artifact from this weird little encounter. Same thing, the hobbits got the sword that ended up just killing the Witch King, or at least allowing the Witch King to be killed from a random encounter in the Barrow Downs. Let that stuff inform your campaign and build it up. I agree. Giuseppe, I'm down with it. Did I give it a thumbs up? I did. Let's see some comments. Any comments in the chat on this or anything else? And then after this, I will call it a day. Let's see. Frank in Reddit says, little secret, I roll, then look at the result, then room, then the encounter, then the surrounding encounters, then the full range on the table, then adjust as needed. I've always rolled and not once took the roll as is. Karmaku says, roll but sprinkle in some specific items here and there. Sure, nothing says you have to only have specific items. John Lennon says, in our OSR Gonzo style play, we didn't worry about any of this. We just played according to the rules. That being said, by the 80s, I wanted more depth. I think that's the transition that a lot of people went to, right? We started off just being happy to play, and kind of whatever craziness happened, and craziness is part of the fun. But I was also, when I was playing, I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. So by the time you get to high school and college, you've kind of been there, done that, and yeah, you're looking for something different. You want your game to progress more, and now most folks are playing it, as adults, and what you want as an adult and what passes muster and what gets you excited as an adult is probably different than it was as a kid. Though I will say that I think a lot of things that happened with frustrations with GMs and players alike is that people who haven't played, they're just picking up playing these games. It's like they didn't have that they didn't have that kid time. They didn't have that we're 10 and we're just messing around and we're going to do all this stuff you hear about people doing. I feel like I probably did. I don't really remember it, but I'm sure we did. I'm sure we went through and tried to destroy a whole village. I'm sure we tried to look at deities and demigods and think, how can I kill Demogorgon? Or how can I kill Orcus? Right? What kind of goofy, crazy nonsense can we get into? When everybody's 10 and you're doing it, it all just seems fun and goofy, and you forget about it as soon as you've done it. It's just something you share on the playground. Look what we did, right? And you go. When you're later on, high school, college, post-college, but you're new to these games, you can still kind of have those urges. And obviously, from the amount of times you hear about murder hoboing and things, people do have those urges. But you're not a kid anymore, and people aren't on that same page, and people who have either already did it as kids or they've just already gone through that stage don't have the patience or the inclination to want to play through the childish fantasy, sort of naive fantasy that you may, that this other player may want to play with. And so you get those kind of, disconnects. And of course, just to tie it into what we were talking about with this article, one of the dangers of throwing these things out there is that they players' hands and the players don't treat them with the kind of respect or power that they should have, right? So you get the horn of whatever that the horn of blasting was in there, and they get a hold of it, right? In things like Lord of the Rings in fiction, that the characters generally are pretty careful or measured. They use it in last resort, but you can see someone getting that horn of blasting, and however many, if it has charges, I don't recall offhand, and just start blowing the horn. They're going to town, town square, and just bring everything down. Ha ha ha! Isn't that fun, right? And then you go, and then you think to yourself, well, that's the last time I'm giving a level 1 new guy horn of blasting, right? So I really love the ideas, but just they can backfire. Of course, there are ways to mitigate that. Not necessarily mitigate, but you just run with the consequence. Okay, now you've blown the town apart, and everyone saw you did it, and somebody gets away. Somebody tells the powerful lord, and now you're on the run. But maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe the rest of your players don't want to do that. I think if I was in a game now, someone invited me and say, hey, Todd, you want to play in this game? And, oh yeah, sure. Great. Let's go. And then I'm into it, and we come out of the dungeon, and someone who's new gets the horn of blasting, and they figure out what it does. And then they just level the starting town with it. I probably would get a little frustrated. I'd probably be like, this is not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be on the run from the law first level, right? Outlaw murderer wasn't how I was planning for this to go. And that can happen. And of course, Session Zero, you can help try to diffuse that stuff. You can help try to set up expectations of, hey, respect things. Consequences are going to count. You may not be used to that if you're new to OSR, certainly from other games that don't feature consequences as heavily. Might like to do it, but good stuff. Good stuff, everybody. All right, before everyone checks out, give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed the stream. I hope you did. If you found yourself in the stream and you just, what am I doing here? But I like it. feel free to subscribe. You stay up to date on what's happening with the channel. Juan Cholo says, I, as the mature 12-year-old, ran an AD&D game for my 10-year-old brother and his friends. At one point, they blew up Tiamat by throwing a magical bag of exploding beans down her throat. Yep. I think, I wish I could remember. I don't even remember the goofy stuff we did. We all did that stuff, right? And when you're all 10, 12, it's all huckle, chuckle, ha, 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 right? And when you're doing that and, you're 35 and you had to spend hours late at night once your family's gone to bed to kind of work this up. And then people start kind of doing those chuckle things for fun. And yeah, in one place, if you're blowing up Tiamat, that's great, and everyone appreciate your ingenuity. But if you're doing that and instead it's just, here's Gandalf who's going to hand you your quest and you blow him up with a bag of magic beans, then that same person who's doesn't have tons of time and whatever is now suddenly going like, why the F did I give them a bag of magic beans? Elvis says, yeah, trying to conquer entire kingdoms in Greyhawk. Yep. I think we all went through that stuff, right? Good stuff. Hey, Marcelo, late to the party, but you made it. You can always rewind back to the start. Unless anyone else has any comments, I'm going to wrap it up here. I will mention Sword Timber is still ongoing. I posted, and I know it's gated behind Patreon or channel memberships. I apologize for that, but some folks have been nice enough to support me, and when I can make it kind of worth their while to pitch in a little bit, I try to do it. So this is a way to do that. Hey, Ovalpine Patrol, have a great weekend. You too. At some point, we'll do something. Hopefully, at the end of it all, I called it the what do they call it? The Obsidian Butterfly of the Ifrit Sultan Akmul is the one that went up today for members and such. Really cool art by Terrence. You maybe find the art. I think he's posting it on Facebook and other places, but the text part is for mine and mine alone. But maybe at the end of the month or after the end of the month, we'll throw them all together in something that we can distribute. Put in some kind of zine or little booklet or something that we can toss up. I'm having fun coming up with the prompts, and Terrence's art is very evocative, so it's been great. Have a great weekend. Otherwise, I don't think I have anything else to say. Like I said, subscribe, give it a thumbs up if you haven't already. I appreciate everybody. Game on, everybody. Have a great weekend. I will